So recently I made not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7, but 8 pieces of terrain in less than a week. And I guess I'll show you how I did that. So this was a commission, and as part of that, Robbie here asked me to show him some of my techniques. So the extra pair of hands you can see in the background and doing half the work, those are his. And these clips are from when they weren't even fully dry yet, so stay tuned to the end and I'll show you how they turned out. So for this Warhammer Age of Sigmar table set, we decided we needed 8 pieces of varying sizes. So I decided why not start with the biggest one, which was this pyramid design. I used my Proxxon hot wire cutter to cut out squares of XPS foam that I used to make the base of the pyramid. And I didn't film it because everyone and their gran has seen someone cut out squares of foam on a Proxxon at this point. I also then cut out so many bricks. So many bricks. This took, even with the Proxxon, it took a while, but we got there in the end. So we then had to commandeer every single one of your mum's sewing kit tins and added in some rocks to give some texture, closed the lids and gave them a bloody good shake. So we had probably less than a week in total of time to do this. It was also over my birthday, so we were very busy doing other things at times. So it's hard to tell exactly how much time we really had, but it really wasn't a lot. Definitely not enough to do 8 pieces of Warhammer Age of Sigmar terrain, but here we are. Robbie requested that these structures be very simple so that they can either be added to later on or work for lots of different environments, lots of different situations, and be sort of modified based on different armies. So at his request, we added no windows or doors, anything specific like that, just these sort of main basic very simple structures. Once they were all textured, it was time to start sticking the bricks onto the base form that I'd made earlier. For this I just used tacky glue, which I spread on with a little palette knife. You definitely don't need to do that, I just like it. It's like doing real bricks on a real wall, very professionally as you can see, but we just kept layering them on and on all the way up, which is a very therapeutic thing to do even when you're stressing about getting all finished, but it is one of the nicest parts of the process. I really like doing the brickwork, and I know you can sort of carve bricks in 2 sheets of foam, and it is definitely faster, which we could have done in the situation that we were in, trying to get it done as fast as possible, but I just don't think there's any substitute for actually making the bricks and sticking them on. It just looks better in my opinion and is way more fun to do. I finished off by adding a flat top to the pyramid because we wanted some of them at least to be flat so that any units that can fly would be able to sit on top of there. Since the cost of living crisis has meant this Lurpak tub cost me more than my mum's house did in the 80s, we'll be making good use of it to mix our grout in. It's just a mix of plaster that I've made into the right consistency to work as grout for the model. And using my favourite palette knife to feel like I'm actually doing a real job and just slopping it onto the model. You really don't need to be precious about this, just shove it on and then use a damp cloth or your fingers, which you should be wearing gloves on at the time, to spread out and make sure it's in the cracks, and if all else fails, just absolutely slap it on, rub it off, it'll turn out good pretty much no matter what. And it's probably worth mentioning at this point that because there was 2 of us working on this and no space at my desk, my normal nice lighting and camera setup was AWOL this week. So for the second piece, I used my foam cutter to again cut out some nice XPS foam pieces, slightly angled pieces and some cylindrical pieces. We used some rocks to again make texture in the pieces just by pressing them in, as these pieces are a bit too big to shake around or they probably would have broken. But the texture you get from smashing the rocks into them is really nice. This pink foam I don't like as much and is hard to get the texture into. I don't think it's the same as the pink foam that you get over in the US. Over here in Scotland, getting good XPS foam is a little bit harder and the stuff just doesn't take the texture as well, but I do have a plan for that later. To help with stability, I put toothpicks through the cylinders before sticking them in the base, and then we got to work adding some more of those bricks. Some of them were broken, some of them were hanging off on pieces on the floor, so that it would look a bit more like a ruined wall that had fallen down a bit. Then we had to stick the roof onto this, column, wall, whatever this thing's supposed to be, and we definitely didn't mess it up and have to redo it because I had put it in the wrong place, stuck on my last little piece of column, and there we go. And that was the second one put together. I'm just going to skip the grouting steps for each of these because it's all the same as the first time. So let's get on to number 3. This one started with a few different sizes of cubes that we textured the same way as the other pieces. Honestly, this one got a little bit out of hand. We intended it to be much smaller than it actually turned out to be, and it ended up being nearly the biggest piece that we made. He was a severely chunky boy, but honestly might be my favourite. I just sort of made a design as we went along, just sticking things on. We're going for a sort of very vague general Aztec theme, a little bit set on based in design, but again we really just sort of did whatever felt right, and I really like how this one came out. And on to piece number 4 now, which we have come to affectionately refer to as the birthday cake. My goal with this one was to play a little bit more with line of sight, so I wanted something that we could see through the middle of on a couple different levels for, you know, smaller heroes and bigger monsters. Maybe not so much with the higher up openings, maybe a little bit too tall, but we wanted to leave some more gaps with this one and with the second one that we did already as well. So this one was really the exact same process as the other ones, using the same size of bricks as I made for the very first model for the pyramid, just to keep everything cohesive, and then use the same technique of using the toothpicks through the bricks to make some pillars and getting everything stuck together. You can see that I'm using the pink foam in the middle because I'm just trying to use that up, and it's not great at taking the texture, so it ends up looking even more like a birthday cake because it's blue and pink. Part of me thinks that these colours would actually be kind of cool for a set of terrain someday, but that day is not today. Maybe in the future I'll get some colourful ones done. Piece number 5 was mainly inspired by the fact that Robbie requested that there be resin somewhere in this project, and so I happily obliged. Although maybe not necessarily completely happily, as we'll find out later on when we get to the resin part of the video. But again, exact same technique, just used flat pieces of foam which I textured, and tiny little bricks that I made, and built up some pillars and built up the edges of this little well or pond or reservoir of water of some description, and that was that one done too. So number 6 was a bit of an experiment. We were getting on in time a little bit here, so again wanted something super simple and fast to throw together. I used my shape cutter for my Proxon, which I hadn't tried yet, to make some different shapes. I used my handheld hot foam cutter tool to scribe some simple designs into it. I'm not sure this was entirely successful, and I probably could have planned it a little bit better, but again we were definitely rushing at this point, and we did want them to look like they had been through the wars a little bit. These are Warhammer terrain pieces, so I don't think they would be in perfect condition, or at least that's my excuse as to why some of these designs are a little bit janky, as I did freehand most of them. This last symbol on the top, I promise I did Google and reference it from somewhere, but I'll be honest, we filmed this a little while ago and I can't remember where it's from, so if you know, then please tell me, because I haven't got a Scooby-Doo what this thing is. So here they all are, nice and grouted and ready for painting. And you may be wondering, well, you didn't show us you building pieces 7 or 8, and that's because I didn't film them. We were running out of time, and they were made using the exact same techniques as the other ones. So really, if you think about it, it's not my failure to film, it's me saving you from the boredom of watching the same thing over and over again, but here are the 2 last ones that I made. To get the painting stage started, I did the classic hack of using Mod Podge and paint, which we've all stolen from Black Magic Crafts for years now. I used brown paint just because we were going for a bit of a brown base, and I thought that might be a little bit better than black. To be honest, I don't think it would have made a massive difference, as it was fairly dark in the end, but it was good to experiment and see if a different base made a difference. I did a little bit of modelling paste to the columns of the second piece and to the monolith, just to give some extra texture, especially on the pink foam that didn't take the texture well earlier. So to get the actual painting process started, we did it in a couple of layers. So first I mixed up a base coat that was kind of sandy, beigey. It looks quite peachy on camera, but this was just a base coat. We didn't necessarily get it in all of the cracks to kind of leave a little bit of that darkness, but in the end that didn't really show through that well. We then did a pretty heavy dry brush of a off-white sandy colour over the top of that, and then we did a brown wash over the whole thing. We actually ended up doing a couple different layers of the brown wash and different washes to get to the kind of colour that Robbie was happy with and that he wanted on his pieces. He wanted them a little bit darker than I had originally thought we were doing, so we did end up having to go over it a couple of times, but you could do it in one layer if you pick the right wash for what you're wanting. And then finally we went in with a much lighter dry brush of a similar sandy colour over the top of everything, just to really catch the highlights and the texture. Then it was time to do some finishing touches, so we opted for just a few details to kind of bring things together. For the birthday cake, I added some sand and different coarsenesses of ballast to each of the levels, sprayed it with some isopropyl alcohol to break the surface tension, and then droppered on some watered down Mod Podge to keep it all sealed in. I mixed Mod Podge with various sizes, colours and textures of flock to make a mossy paste to cover all the models in. This is by far one of my favourite parts of making terrain. I always like doing this bit, and you can really honestly never do too much. The Mod Podge will dry clear, so it's never really as heavy as you think it is when you put it on, so just slap it on, put on loads, try and make little mounds of it, use an old brush that you don't mind ruining. You can even do a couple of layers of it. We only had time to do one, but it really does bring everything together and make all of the pieces look cohesive. I can't stress enough how good flocking is. Flock, I love you. Flock will never let me down. It'll always be there, unless Woodlands Unix decide to put their prices up, in which case, flock off. Oh god, that was awful. I didn't say that. Okay, so the last thing to be done was the resin pour. Now, we had very little time to get this done, and I would usually use a 2-part epoxy resin for this kind of thing. It's a little bit on the thick side for UV resin, but we just simply did not have time. So I decided to try and do the UV resin in a couple of layers to get the effect that we were going for. I did a little bit of sand to the bottom of the pool here. I used the blue alcohol ink to tint the resin and poured it over the sand, trying not to disturb it too much, as I really should have glued it down before I did the resin, but again, no time. We were just going balls to the walls at this point. I used tweezers to add in little bits of lichen to the pool. I think that's how you say it, lichen. If not though, I mean, I am Scottish, so there's a probably 40% chance that you understand anything I'm saying in this video, so lichen it is. I cured it using a UV torch and added more layers. After the final layer, I noticed there was a little bit of a bubble in the middle of the resin pool. I'm not that surprised. I knew UV resin wasn't the best tool for the job, but it's the only thing that we had time for. And of course, Robbie had begged me to have some resin in the project, so he was pretty happy that it was there. And it's definitely something that can be fixed in the future for him. He wanted a learning experience, and the best way to learn about resin is for it to fuck up in the end. And so here's the final results. We made 8 pieces of terrain in less than a week, and for that, they're not half bad. They're definitely not the most complicated things I've ever made, but for what was requested, a set of simple terrain in less than a week, I think we did a pretty good job. I think we've ended up with a nice cohesive set of terrain that can be used for years to come, that can be modified or added on to if needs be, and since this video was actually filmed a little while ago, these pieces have been used multiple times on multiple tables since then, and have absolutely nothing to do with the fact that I have beat him every single time, and that's definitely the truth. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and like and comment and all those things. Let me know what you thought of the video, and thank you again for watching. It means a lot. See you next time.